I have decided to recontest my seat of Fisher at the September 7 election following the approaches from many local people. I have to say that I'm particularly proud to have been elected on 8 occasions as the member for Fisher, and it's a great privilege to serve in the Australian Parliament. As Speaker, I endeavoured to bring about reforms to the Parliament to make the Parliament a place that all Australians could be proud of. Unfortunately, the Ashbygate affair, in which the LNP candidate, Mr Bruff, and other LNP and Liberal Party figures were deeply involved, meant that so far I've not been able to complete the reform process. What is particularly interesting is that Mr Bruff, unlike some others adversely mentioned by the judge, did not seek leave to appeal the judge's adverse findings against him. I have to say I'm particularly proud of the many achievements that so far I've been able to bring about for the Sunshine Coast, including recently the $46.8 million for the TAFE Health Centre, Learning Centre, Bruce Highway upgrades, and also of course the $800,000 recently for the development of the Sunshine Coast Regional Tennis Centre at Caloundra. I do want to place on record that I am totally opposed to LNP plans to sell off the Sunshine Coast University Hospital, which the community here on the Sunshine Coast expects to be a public hospital available for local people. There is much more to be done in Fisher. We have a rapidly growing population, and certainly we have needs in the area of infrastructure to meet the needs of our growing population. It is a great privilege to serve as the member for Fisher, and I'm hoping to continue to receive the support of people at the next election. I have to be honest though and say that this is a David and Goliath effort. This is my most difficult election ever because I'm up against the major parties, but one of the reasons I'm standing is to provide real choice for local people.
What about the information exposed in the federal court about the content of text messages that you sent to staffers as a parliamentarian?
Well, let me say to you that if any of you had your text messages looked at, I'm sure that you wouldn't want necessarily the substance of them made public, but you also ought to note that they were private text messages sent to someone some 4 months before he became a staffer in my office, someone who Inge and I considered to be a personal friend. But they were personal, private messages between two people who were friends and not between an employer and an employee.
Do you hope to keep the Ashby affair in the public spotlight at least for another month or so?
Look, the thing is that Mr Bruff was deeply involved in the Ashbygate affair. The federal judge made adverse findings against him and against others. What is particularly significant is that while others sought to appeal the judge's adverse findings against them, Mr Bruff did not seek to challenge the judge's adverse findings against him.
You ever say you're running because you just want the money?
Oh look, that's an irrelevant consideration, that suggestion is entirely inappropriate and incorrect.
Mr. Slipper, who would you say you're directing preferences to?
Preferences, sorry, I wasn't quite sure where the question was coming from.
Sorry.
Well look, one doesn't decide what happens with preferences until nominations close. They have closed, but of course those who have nominated will not be announced until tomorrow, and I'll be making the appropriate decisions at the appropriate time. The last 18 months have not been easy for Inge and me and my children and my parents and my parents-in-law and my friends, but I really appreciate the support of my wife Inge and my entire family, and I'm happy to continue to serve the people of Fisher and the people of the Sunshine Coast in the Australian Parliament, if I'm privileged to, for the 9th occasion, be elected as the member for Fisher at the election on the 7th of September.
Mr Sliver, you faced court in December on the allegations of misusing your cab charge documents. If you were successful in winning the seat again, what would you do during that time? Would you stand aside for the trial?
Well, I think you've really got to look at the facts of this matter. You've got something called the Mention Protocol, and lots of members of Parliament, in fact, have disputes with the Department of Finance over the use of entitlements. I mean, frankly, the entitlements regime is quite a maze, and so when the then Senator Minchin had to repay money, he set up something called the Mention Protocol, which meant that disputes between members of Parliament and the Department of Finance are dealt with administratively. For instance, Tony Abbott recently misused Comcar and airfare entitlements, and he was just able to repay that money, close to $10,000, no questions asked.
Why do you say your
can I
case has
finish
gone
my
this far?
Can I finish my answer, please? Peter Reith was allowed to repay $50,000, no questions asked, and there are hundreds of instances of members of Parliament who have disputes with the Department of Finance, and those matters are handled administratively. I wrote to the Department of Finance on 4 occasions with a view to being given equivalent treatment to that extended to Mr Abbott and Mr Reith and many others, and I really don't understand why perhaps $250,000 has been spent investigating my travel, and they're prepared to spend another $70,000 on a 7-day trial, and over a figure of $964, which is disputed. Now, obviously, I'm not going to talk about the substance of the case.
Do you have a
but
theory
all I'm
on
seeking,
why yours has gone this far?
But all I'm seeking is equivalence of treatment. What was your question, sorry?
Do you have a theory then on why your case has gone this far when others haven't?
Well, it's very interesting that the investigation into me occurred shortly after I accepted the position of Speaker of the House of Representatives.
So do you see a vendetta here then?
Well, it's not for me to say that there's a vendetta, but let me say that it's up to each of you to draw your own conclusions.
If Mr Bruff goes on to win this the seat of Fisher, could the Ashby affair still come back to haunt him?
Well, there is a complaint made by Mr Graham Perrott, the member for Moreton, to the Australian Federal Police about Mr Bruff's involvement with former staff members in downloading my diary. That is, of course, a matter for the Australian Federal Police, and I imagine that the Federal Police will look at that matter, as I understand they said that they will, once the applications for leave to appeal lodged by Ashby and Ashby's then solicitor Harmer have been determined by the Federal Court.
How would you characterise Mr Bruff's role?
Well, I suppose, considering that when I had my elected office in Caloundra, Mr Bruff came to me as a constituent, and I assisted him and signed him up into the then Liberal Party. I'm a bit disappointed by Mr Bruff's actions. In particular, he sought to stack me out as the LNP member for Fisher. I've been a member of the party for decades, and he signed a whole lot of people up simply for the purposes of gaining pre-selection. You ought to remember, of course, that prior to the merger, Mr Bruff, maybe it was after the merger, he referred to the LNP as a party built on lies and deceit and as an abomination.
You know, the last 18 months have been extremely difficult, made quite difficult in some respects by actually you guys. I've had helicopters come down over my house. I've had telephoto lenses looking into our home. I've had somebody, I think might have been from one of the local TV stations, who actually put their hand on the bonnet of my car in my garage and caressed the bonnet, which I found rather strange. They're obviously trying to check to see whether the temperature on the car was hot or cold.
And we saw the hand marks because there was some dust on the bonnet. We hadn't cleaned the car.
I've had a situation where this was a direct hit on our marriage. Our marriage is real. I have stuck by Peter. I love Peter. There's so many things you guys don't understand about him. He's made some mistakes, yes. but he's actually a really nice, decent, kind-hearted guy.
What
And
mistakes?
it's,
That's a
I'm
nice thing to
answering
say.
the question. So, you just don't really understand him, and I think that's really sad. So dealing with the media has been very difficult. So I do want to say to people that our marriage is real. I've had to listen to rumours spread throughout this community about how our marriage is not real, that we've divorced and all those sorts of things. So I think one of the reasons I'm also standing here is to tell you and to tell the people of the Sunshine Coast and Fisher that I am standing by my husband, that I do love my husband, that I took my vows seriously when I married him 7 years ago on the 12th of August 2006. So that's one of the things I guess I really want to say to you. Yes, I am supporting him. He has made some mistakes, but he is a really good guy, and through all of this, through the hell, through our marriage being targeted specifically, he has continued, and I don't know how he's done it, to go out day after day and represent the people of the electorate of Fisher. How many people out there would go out and put up with the absolute rubbish that he's put up with every day, doing what he has to do and getting money in for this electorate and for the Sunshine Coast, because he wanted to actually help the Sunshine Coast.
The real poll that counts is the poll on the 7th of September. I'm putting my name forward because I want to continue to serve the people of Fisher here on the Sunshine Coast, and I'm very happy to accept the verdict of the people of Fisher on the 7th of September. Have a lovely
Thank
day.
you.
Can we get